Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Recover You. I am here with Kim Hansen Petroni today. I'm very excited to have her. Again, I'm trying to think if this is the first time I've ever had somebody on twice so far. We're in the third season of Recover You. You have had a previous episode. We'll make sure to link that in the show notes below as well. But welcome back. We're so happy to have you. Let me just give a quick introduction for those of you who don't know Kim. She is a relational recovery coach. And she has a master's in counseling, is a multi-certified professional, including board certified coach, APSAT certified partner coach, and supervisor for the Association for Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists, early recovery couples empathy model coach, certified divorce coach, and a brain spotting practitioner, which is super cool. She specializes in helping individuals and couples navigate the complexities of betrayal trauma. Through her company, Coaching Hope for You, Kim offers support via groups, workshops, and private coaching. And most recently, she has written a book, and I guess it's a workbook because you utilize it, you do some exercise in it and life application as well. That's called Not a Casserole Widow. And this is aimed towards women to encourage self-confidence as well as providing education for them as they prepare to divorce after betrayal. So we're very excited to kind of discuss that today. I actually did a recent survey asking people to, give us feedback on what they'd like to hear more about. One of the things people mentioned specifically was divorce. So the timing of this is really perfect, and we're happy to have you on. So thanks for being here.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me again.
So tell me a little bit about, well, let's talk about the name of the book first of all, right? Because I think that is, it's really impactful, Not a Casserole Widow. Tell me why you named it that specifically.
Of course. So when I first found that there was infidelity and some issues in my own marriage, and I chose to separate, at that point in time, I went to a very large church, and right about the exact same time, a pastor died unexpectedly. His wife was very similar to me. She has 5 kids. I had 4 kids. We were both homeschooling moms. We were right about the same age. And I was able to observe an extremely different parallel path. Her husband died and the church was flooded with well-wishers. He was beloved. Just a super great guy. And it was so unexpected. Mm-hmm. And her Facebook had people fixing her lawn, showing up on the drive. I'm just really supporting her. And my life exploded and I was completely alone. I felt also like a widow. She was a widow. Her husband had just died. I had lost the husband that I knew. And I felt like I was walking through widowhood at the same time, but completely alone because I couldn't really talk to anybody about it. I definitely was not getting casseroles in my freezer. Nobody was bringing me food. And yet I still had 4 kids. I was still trying to homeschool. I was still trying to do all the same things without any support. So at that time, I was going through a training, and one of the articles that I read was how lonely we feel because we don't get any casseroles. So I felt that name, Not a Casserole Widow, was so important to me and so pivotal in my growth. I wanted to make sure that I could provide casseroles of some nature, food support, education, whatever it might be, to women that were in a very isolated divorce and betrayal trauma space.
I love that. And it really is true. I think anybody that's gone through this, whether they get divorced or even they're just going through reconciliation, that whole phase of like, what is my life? And I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And I just lost the person that I thought I was married to, right? Even if they stay together, goes through that to some extent. And it's like, it's one of those areas that people feel very, very alone. Very often they don't feel like they're allowed to talk about it. And so even if they do reconcile or choose the path of divorce, both directions, I feel like there's an extreme amount of isolation for a lot of people. And I notice that a lot as well. It's a really, really good analogy to kind of share. I think it's a great title, kind of feeds right into that right away. I did a quick little Google thing because I was like, I'm pretty sure divorce statistics say something like 50% of divorces have to do with infidelity, right? And sure enough, because, and a lot of times in the work that you and I are seeing a lot is pornography addiction playing into either the primary factor of infidelity or a piece of it. And so I looked it up, and this I think was some statistics from 2024. Pornography addiction was cited as a factor in 56% of divorces, according to a recent study. That's crazy.
It's crazy.
56%. So this is happening where people are getting divorces for infidelity that includes pornography, and they just feel absolutely, totally alone. And even if they have friends that sort of know, it's not viewed the same way as, like, to your point, death or, divorce for other reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a huge stigma around it. I appreciate you bringing in the concept of even if they're staying within the relationship versus exiting the relationship. And that is very poignant too, is that it is a divorce within the relationship. You want to stay in that relationship. But if you have someone who is addicted to pornography, then you didn't know that the man that you thought you married was not the same guy that you thought you married. So you are actually a widow. And at the same time, choosing to renegotiate and reevaluate that relationship and recreate it into be something genuine and honest and new. So that too sparks that not a casserole widow, because I'm totally alone and isolated trying to manage this. And the stigma around it is unbelievably shameful and condescending. And it keeps women in coupleships from moving forward in a healing space. So.
Do you have any idea in the work that you do over the time that you've done it? My experience has been that a high percentage of couples stay together as long as the partner who did the betrayal, who did the infidelity, who perpetrated the harm is really truly willing to recover, and that the betrayed partners are typically fairly patient with that process in terms of really wanting to. So I think I guess my question is, I'm curious. When I see two people who really want to do the work, the percent of people that stay together is very, very high. In the grand scheme of, how many people really want to do the work on the person who's done the infidelity side, do you have any concept of, how many, what the percentage is that leads to divorce where this is happening?
I don't know what the numbers are because it's really hard to get people to report why they're divorcing. Yeah. And because many states are no-fault states, there's no reporting for it. Everybody just kind of goes their separate ways. I'd say in the clientele that I have and just sort of the arenas that I run in, there's a higher chance that women and relationships will stay together versus the divorce, but it's not necessarily that they're staying together because he's in good recovery. From a faith community, they stay because this is what they think they're supposed to do. That's what we just keep praying about it. Something will happen. They need to be faithful, gracious, whatever all those words are. And it starts getting into a space where if the men aren't, and I'm just using men generally because that's usually what I deal with. If the men aren't honest and genuine, it really doesn't have to do with the relapses or the slips or whatever words we want to tether to, that it's the deceit and the betrayal, the deception within the relationship that causes the relationship to rupture. So I honestly think from what I'm seeing that it's the actual porn addiction that's causing the problem. It's the lies. And trying to help men come out of that space of, I don't need to be ashamed of myself. I'm actually having a problem. It's a big deal. It's a national crisis that I'm dealing with. I got to learn how to be honest with my wife about it so that she can help regulate herself. So when I finally see women, kind of like define it as the visual is a Great Wall of China, where if there's betrayal in a relationship, we don't know where we're going to go with this. He's doing some check boxes and doing all the things that we want him to do. I give the wives and the women permission, just hang out on top of that Great Wall of China. We got one and two sides of it. One drop off is divorce. The other drop off is staying in the relationship. And they're both extreme choices. So what we can do is stay just right on top of it and observe and prepare ourselves and get emotionally regulated and watch and see what he's doing. And give yourself permission just to kind of grow through the betrayal and understand what that experience has been for you before you make that final, leap, whichever way it's going to be.
Oh, for sure. I think I agree so totally. In that first phase, it's so important that you don't put any pressure on yourself to make a decision verbally or otherwise. There is so much no pressure there for you to, there shouldn't be pressure there for you to, say, okay, I'm going to make this work with you before you've seen if he's going to make it work, if he's going to be repentant, if he's going to have changed behavior, if it's possible, right? And alternatively, you can feel almost pressured to get divorced in some cases, and giving it a little bit of time to see if he's a transformed person. Sometimes your emotions and your mind shift a little bit, and then it's like, okay, I now have a clearer path one way or another. Yeah. So for those that find that they fall on the side of the wall, that they need to pursue the divorce for whatever reason, because I do want to just clarify from the perspective of Recover You, that, the moment that infidelity happens, we think you're free to go. Okay. So we don't want to put any pressure on you one way or another, but for whatever reason, when someone comes to that decision point, however quickly or however long it took them, and it's still a really difficult process. One of the frustrations, you've been divorced, I've been divorced, going through that myself, I was like, this process should be so much easier. Like, this is such a frustrating process. Like, this is crazy. And that's unfortunate. I think in the Christian world, it's fraught, right? For many reasons, within your church, within your friend communities, within your theological belief systems, but even just with the governmental process of like filing and coming to agreements and getting the paperwork done, it is hard if you are not both on the same page and both trying to expedite the process. And then, of course, you have your own emotional and mental processing through that. So tell us, how does the workbook help those who are beginning to navigate that journey? What is it all about, and what can they expect from the workbook?
Sure. Well, when you go into divorce, there's two different aspects of your brain that we have to acknowledge. And one side is that you're in trauma. There is PTSD, complex PTSD, all of these things, whatever label we want to give, there's chaos going on inside your brain that's emotional trauma. And at the same time, all of that is swirling about. You're being requested to understand the legalities of your state, of your county. What does divorce look like? It's like a whole nother language that you're being required to learn. So asking someone who's in trauma to learn, it would be like asking you to learn French in 30 days. While you're in trauma, it's just really, really hard. So the workbook breaks it up into those two exact pieces. One piece, volume 1, is for the emotions that you experience and you walk through, and really giving you validation and the opportunity to explore and work through those. And then the second piece is types of law, types of divorce, types of mediation, types of all these things. How do you organize your documents? What does it look like what's an attorney going to ask you for when you walk into that first meeting? How do you need to be prepared? Are you supposed to be documenting interaction with the kids and dad? What does that look like? Just all of those different spaces and tactical things that you need to do along with the emotional dysregulation that you experience. So the first part of it is emotional, really kind of understanding your emotions so that you can harness them. And then when you get to sitting down and filling out paperwork, you're better equipped to do that. So that's kind of the big summary of it.
Yeah, it's huge, because to your point, most people going through this process have never done it before, and it's overwhelming because of the reasons that you're getting divorced. And then you have to navigate this process without the support of your partner, obviously, because you're going against them in this. And so you're trying to do it by yourself, and it's legalese. And sometimes, to your point, you mentioned kids being involved as well. And so you have all of these different agreements that you have to come to in terms of custody and living arrangements and dividing of assets. And it's it's a lot for somebody to process when they're already grieving so much of a loss of, things and decades probably that they've put emotional energy into this relationship. They've probably put years, if not another decade, into trying to repair or to see where this would go after, discovery. And it's just a lot to think through and process. When you see this going on, and I would venture to guess a majority of divorces are not the most amicable, right? Like, yeah, wouldn't it be great?
If they're with me, it's because they don't have an amicable divorce.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, it kind of is like, wouldn't it be great if two people could just come to the conclusion that this isn't going to work and we could be like really nice to each other through the process? That would be awesome, but that's not normally the case. So when women are navigating this and they have someone that's being, fairly difficult, whether it is, with trying to grab more of the money or trying to get you to pay their lawyer, just all these different, or trying to get more custody of the children or whatever it is, it's like, it's just so much stress, and it's not, they're thinking in their emotional brain, right, at this point, and is super, super traumatized. What is it that women can do as they're navigating this to help themselves sort of feel grounded and navigate it in a way that, to the best of their ability, in 10 years, they're going to look back and go, okay, I did my best?
Okay. Let's hold on to that 10-year piece, because that's actually critical, what you just said about that. So women we have a perception that when we walk into an attorney or the legal environment, that justice will be served. You have experienced an injustice in your relationship and you've come to get a divorce to experience justice. That is not going to happen. We don't receive justice from the courts. They want to mediate a balance. They want equality for both parties to come out in the same space. So for my women, I want them to seek the emotional release and the support for justice from me, from my groups, that's a different space than the legality. When they walk into that legal zone, we have to understand that, especially if it's mediation, that mediator is there to get everybody to agree. They don't really care. I mean, they kind of care, like they just want both parties to come out and be equally happy, is kind of the general summary. So when I have women who are walking into divorce or mediation, whatever path they choose to take, is that they know themselves. They have to remember that. They know themselves. They know their husbands better than anybody on the planet. And for them not to discount what they know to be true about what they need, even though an attorney or the mediator is saying, well, none of the decrees are written that way. Mm-hmm. An example might be, we know that he's notoriously late for picking up the children. Just an example. He's always 30 minutes late. Okay, well then in the decree, we need to actually say if he's late, he relinquishes that time. If he's 30 minutes, otherwise the kids will be waiting 4 hours for their dad. Those are small nuances that when I work with them, they know that, even though if the attorney says, no, we're not going to do that, for them to push forward into that space. Mm-hmm. So they need to feel empowered that they know exactly what their kids need, and they need to know what if something on the document that gets written up doesn't feel right, let's look at it. Let's ask some hard questions. Mm-hmm. An attorney or a mediator, and make sure that this is written correctly. To your point of the 10-year space, what women need to also acknowledge is what I'm writing today. If I have children, it is not going to look the same in 5 years. It is not going to look the same in 10 years. If you've got a 4-year-old taking ballet in like the little, at the YMCA or whatever ballet place they're taking, they may be playing soccer as a junior in high school, and we need to make sure that all of those fees are still included in the decree. We have to offer allowance for shifts and changes and growth, and for review of the decree as they move forward. So that's kind of it for them to understand that the courts like to create it as a concrete space, but it actually needs to be a breathing document that we can come back to and we can relook at. And I think once women are able to evaluate that we can create another look at this, it doesn't become quite so terrifying.
Mm-hmm. When we feel like things are being taken away from us, It feels, it can really elevate our emotions, and there are periods of time where stress is so intense and things feel so unfair that we feel so heightened that we almost feel crazy. So
Absolutely.
there's so much in divorce and in co-parenting when one partner has already hurt you. They get so much from the divorce itself, and then they still try to push your buttons, and it feels very much like control is being taken away from you in a lot of ways. Is there anything that you recommend that can sort of help women through that mental, emotional concept? Is it remembering that this really is short term in the long run? Is it dropping into like, I know what truth is, and no matter what this person, no matter how they behave, like they're just living in some alternate reality? Like, how do you kind of help women kind of navigate that? It's a really real thing that it just feels like this is so totally unfair that this is crazy and it shouldn't be happening. But it feels, it's all hitting on me.
Yeah. I'm currently living in the twilight zone, and I don't know how to put my feet on concrete, on solid ground. One of the first things that pops into my mind when you're saying that is for women to give themselves permission to know, I'm actually in trauma. My brain is not thinking clearly, and it's valid. I'm experiencing chaos is coming at me. There's no justice in it. It's not, I don't deserve this. I don't know where God is right now. It's bad. And at the same time, give yourself permission to take a step back. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be in trauma for a little bit. You just be there, work through it, and then know that you can give yourself time to respond. So logistically, what that actually looks like is that when you're in trauma, when you're experiencing the space of someone who has intentionally abused you, deceived you, whatever has happened, I help women acknowledge it. It would be kind of like sitting in a courtroom across, this is a harsh word, but across from your rapist and trying to have a conversation with them. That's where your brain is, I'm not safe, I'm not safe, I'm not safe, I'm not safe. That's okay. Let's just not be safe for a minute. And take a breath. And your fight or flight, the amygdala in the back of your brain is checked in. So what we want to do is bring our prefrontal cortex back online. That's that CEO, that thinking, that concrete space. And there are tools that they can use to do that simply by using your five senses. Name, what can I see around me? What do I smell right now? I'm constantly telling my ladies, eat Altoids. It will activate your mouth and the sensory and bring you back into a concrete space of, okay, I just got hit with something major. How am I going to deal with this? Find friends, find someone, if it's emails that you get or texts that you get that really trigger you, either A, give yourself permission to read it and wait 24 hours before you respond, or have a friend start reading them. Mm-hmm. So that they can filter through some of the things, what's really being asked. Because there is a space when we're in trauma and we get hit with new information, our brains just don't process numbers. So if you're trying to process how much do I owe on a monthly basis for something and trying to turn it over to a court, your brain literally doesn't have the capacity to do that until we can really kind of give you tools to settle down and come back into your own. So the first place, understand it's totally normal. You're not crazy or losing your mind.
Yeah. Even though it feels like that. Yeah. Yeah. What if you had to, give one piece of advice or a takeaway from the workbook to women that are considering divorce, or maybe is it applicable even to people who have been through divorce? What's one thing you'd like them to take away from this?
I would like for them to know that they are not alone. That even though there are so many women out there that don't really talk about this, you're actually not alone. There are places for you to find support. There are all kinds of groups and organizations that you can actually get another face to recognize who you are, and that there's support out there for you. So I think that's kind of the reason for the book, is that if you have to kind of do it in secrecy and navigate some of these things, it's an easy way to do it. It's on Kindle, you don't have to buy it. That you can do that, and at the same time knowing that there's the way that the book is created, it's almost as if you're in a coaching session with me. So we do sort of a back and forth narrative along with tools. And I hope that women feel like they're not doing this alone. To help them not feel alone too, I also offer free groups where they can just come in. It's a drop-in group every other week. You just show up, hang out. I don't call on you. You don't really have to. There's no homework. You just come and you see faces of people. They're just like me going through this. So that's kind of my big agenda, is to try to let women know there is support. We can get through this. What you kind of expect is not going to happen. It's not easy, and that's okay. Most of these women have done hard things for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
We just have to rechannel that courage.
What you just brought up kind of made me think about this too. Is two things. I've heard the phrase, when you talk to people who've been divorced, the number one regret of people who have been divorced isn't that they're divorced, it's that they didn't do it sooner. Yep. So there's a lot of encouragement in that, I think, in the aspect of you'll be okay, and people that go through it are okay. But I know when you're making that decision, there's a lot of times where it's very overwhelming, and there's this fear of the unknown and this fear of not being okay. Is there a piece of encouragement to people that are kind of like on that fence right now, where they maybe have the evidence that the relationship is not healthy, it's not going to improve, but maybe there's some stability there, with the unification of the family, or there's some familiarity that kind of just feels scary to let go of, but they know it's the right thing. Is there any advice or thought that you give to those women to encourage them?
One of the things that comes to mind is when you make the choice, no matter what the time frame is, to acknowledge that your path is your path. It's very unique. You're your own person. You've got kids. Don't have kids. Your husband. Everybody has got a unique design in where you're going to go forward. To encourage is just to avoiding the shame. You've stayed for a specific reason. You've stayed. Most of the women stay for a time frame so that they can walk out without feeling regrets. So they can walk out and say, I have done everything in my value system, in my core, and my faith that I know to have been right. And he now needs to be given back to God. I can't fix this anymore. Mm-hmm. It looks like walking up to a door, and opening it, and you don't see the path in front of you. It's kind of like a black hole. And that's okay. You don't have to go through that black hole. We just have to open up the door. It's one small step at a time. That is all. Women will get in a space. Well, I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I don't know if I'm going to have money. I don't know if I do. I'm 55. Do I want to get a job? All of those things. And what we want to do is that if you know that you have done everything that you feel empowered to do, we're just going to take one step. And is that one step just calling an attorney? Is that one step coming in and joining one of my free groups? Is that one step joining Gretchen Baskerville's got a life-saving divorce Facebook group. It's free. She's got plenty of tools in that for people to explore. So there's so many places to kind of start building yourself up in a space of preparation before you make that big jump. Be okay. Kind of like pick what side of the Great Wall of China you want to live on for a little bit.
No, I think that's great, because what I'm hearing there is, as you're navigating this, gather the resources, gather the informational. So then you have your logical brain online, you have your thinking brain online. And then as you continue to navigate, you're going to day by day, step by step, exercise by exercise, do the emotional processing. And that's going to take more time. That's okay that it's going to ebb and flow. It's going to feel scarier some days. It's going to feel exciting another day. You're going to feel stuck one day. You're going to feel free the next day. There's so much to allowing that to kind of come and go naturally. But the tangible things that you can do day to day is to work with someone who kind of can guide you through it, to talk to somebody who's experienced it, to utilize the variety of resources from free to paid counseling, to talk to your lawyer and get the best advice, because they're going to be on your team, and to just gather, so that when you do choose to make that decision, you feel capable, you feel like you are aware, and like what the next step is.
100% agree.
Coming from you have a faith background, I have a faith background. Maybe not everybody we work with, but a lot of the people that come to us also share a faith background. I know that sometimes complicates and muddies things for a little while they're figuring it out, right? Is there anything, like, if you had the attention of leaders in the church in front of you right now, yeah. And they, you know, when this happens in families in the church, they typically go to their pastor, their associate pastor. If every pastor and associate pastor who was you know, giving advice to these women right now, if you had their ear, is there anything that you would want to share to the American church about supporting these women, encouraging them, navigating, you know, their questions? Like, what advice would you give to the church?
Give them the freedom to choose. Give women the freedom to make their own choices. They know exactly what they're doing. That's huge. I love it. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like I wish we didn't have to say that. That's so poignant. I'm so glad you phrased it that way. Give women the freedom to choose. That's exactly what they need. I am so glad we had this conversation. I'm so glad you wrote your book. I think it is so needed, obviously, based on this conversation. There's so many women that are going through this. They need the guidance. They need the support. We will put the links to your book and your coaching practice in the show notes. But if you can just share those, let people know, you know, where can they find the book? Where can they connect with you and work with you if they need to in the future? Sure. The book is called Not a Casserole Widow. It's on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle as well. I also have a website, Not a Casserole Widow, that offers groups and resources, my free group, and then some other groups, and a network that we have, a very private network for women to come into with all sorts of valuable resources within that. If you are in a marriage and you want to remain in that marriage, or you're curious in exploring it, my other website is Coaching Hope for You, number 4, letter U, Coaching Hope for You. And that space you'll find you'll find everything that's on Not a Casserole Widow, but you'll also find some more balanced interactions for you and your spouse. That's awesome. Anything else you want to leave the listeners with today in this episode? I thank you so much for being willing to explore this and let me talk about my book. It's really, really critical that women understand they don't have to do this on their own. And in fact, it's more financially lucrative if you don't do it on your own and you find and help. Absolutely. Well, we're so grateful that you're out there and you're doing this work and you're encouraging women, helping them to feel empowered and to have the autonomy and to make that choice and to have the freedom to do so. So thank you for everything you're doing and for sharing your wisdom and your book with us today. We really appreciate it. Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.